Hi, my name is Ben Binder. I'm a longtime resident of Boulder and have been interested in the Flatiron Gravel Pit, now known as CU South, ever since Boulder County issued a permit to mine sand and gravel at the site in 1981. In 2021, the Boulder City Council approved an agreement to annex the property, but the agreement has many negative impacts for Boulder residents and should be repealed. In this video, I will give a brief history of CU South from the viewpoint of a Boulder resident. In the next video, I will discuss embarrassing blunders in the development of a flood control project to protect downstream residents and troubling aspects of the annexation agreement. I have created this slideshow by myself and have not received any compensation from anyone. Universities, which plan to be around for centuries, wisely build on hills to avoid major floods. But in 1996, CU purchased a flood-prone gravel pit for a new campus. CU South is a 308-acre depleted gravel pit located in the historic streambed of South Boulder Creek. It sits at the foot of a major drainage basin. CU South is located at the foot of the 136 square mile South Boulder Creek drainage basin and is subject to serious flooding. CU South is comprised of the depleted Flatiron Gravel Pit, and it is located south of Table Mesa Drive between US 36 and Broadway. Boulder was fortunate to have been the home of the late Dr. Gilbert White, the father of floodplain management. Located at the foot of steep canyons, Boulder is one of the most flood-prone cities in Colorado. The city wisely followed the teachings of Dr. White and developed policies that direct development to areas outside of floodplains and wetlands. Floodplains and wetlands are designated for open space. When CU purchased the property, 220 of the 308 acres of the gravel pit, 71% of the land, were designated for open space in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. Furthermore, the gravel pit reclamation plan mandated large ponds in riparian areas and stated that when reclaimed, the land would be suitable for wildlife habitat. But at the City Council meeting at which the annexation agreement was approved, past Mayor Sam Weaver, in his infomercial to promote the agreement, made the following blatantly false statement.
So I think it's worth noting that this particular parcel of land was identified in the 1977 Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan as an area of land to be annexed into Boulder. It was contiguous with it, and it was envisioned at that time to be a subdivision. But I guess the way I read this is it's been intended to be a housing-focused piece of land development for 45 years.
Having ridden around the property in the early 1980s, I was familiar with the topography of the land. When I learned CU was going to purchase the gravel pit for a new campus, as an engineer, I felt a responsibility to advise CU of the flood-prone nature of the property. This page from the Flatiron Company's 1981 gravel mining permit application indicates that the majority of the property CU purchased was in the 100-year floodplain even before 4 million cubic yards of sand and gravel were removed from the site. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, publishes maps of areas that will be inundated by floods. This official 1988 FEMA map indicated that the entire gravel pit was removed from the floodplain by a 6,000-foot-long earthen levee. But the levee was not permitted as a permanent structure. It was only a temporary levee to keep water out of the gravel operations. It was not constructed to FEMA standards, and the reclamation plan for the gravel pit mandated that the levee had to be removed at the completion of mining. Earthen levees are subject to failure, especially ones not built to required standards. This flood map would lead people to believe that it was safe to build in the light blue area, which would be inundated if the levee failed. As a professional engineer, I felt it a duty to inform CU administrators of the flawed FEMA map, and I naively thought they would be interested in learning about South Boulder Creek floodplain issues. But when I went to speak with the individual coordinating the purchase, I quickly learned he was not at all interested. CU is focusing its efforts on getting needed approvals from the Colorado Commission of Higher Education, the Capital Development Committee, and the State Joint Budget Committee, and on keeping the deal secret from the City of Boulder. So I made a trip to Denver and spoke with staff members of the State Joint Budget Committee. They were very interested and sent me this fax and the following memorandum. As a result of my informing Joint Budget Committee staff of the dangers of South Boulder Creek floods, the Joint Budget Committee required CU to conduct a floodplain study before purchasing the property. The study found that not only was a significant portion of CU's gravel pit in the 100-year floodplain, but so were hundreds of homes north of US 36. So we knew about South Boulder Creek flooding problems in 1996, 17 years before the 2013 flood. I have been working for meaningful flood protection since 1996, but CU supporters accuse me and others of placing lives at risk because we have concerns about the city's 100-year flood protection plan and the terms of the annexation agreement. CU delayed flood protection for many, many years and extorted advantageous terms in the annexation agreement by refusing to allow the city to use land needed for flood control until the city agreed to annex the property and provide water, sewer, and other city services. But now CU and its supporters are viciously accusing individuals who criticize the annexation agreement of placing people's lives at risk. In 1995, when mining was winding down, the Flatiron Companies applied to the city to develop the property for a new Women of the West Museum and luxury homes. 20 acres was to be donated to the museum to curry favor with influential Boulder politicians. Past Mayor Leslie Durgan was on the museum's advisory board. Because of floodplain issues, poor access, high groundwater levels, endangered species habitat, and Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan open space designations, the city did not look favorably upon the application. It was unlikely that any private developer in his or her right mind would be interested in the troubled property. On April 10, 1996, it was announced the gravel pit would be purchased by CU. I am now going to briefly discuss some troubling aspects of CU's acquisition of the gravel pit that would make one question the trustworthiness of CU administrators. When CU was acquiring the property, it was known there were serious flooding problems that needed to be addressed, and that the majority of the property was designated for open space in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. CU, which always professes to be a cooperative neighbor, could have collaborated with Boulder on the acquisition, but instead paid a consultant $10,000 to develop a strategy to keep Boulder in the dark until all state approvals were obtained and the regents approved the purchase. All major university capital purchases, such as a new 308-acre campus, are required by state statute to be approved by the Colorado Commission on Higher Education. The CCHE is required to perform a rigorous review of the purchase and recommend approval or denial. But CU used the good old boy system and a loophole to submit the purchase to the Commission as an information item. How many loopholes in the annexation agreement will CU exploit if the property is annexed to the city? When extorting favorable terms in the annexation agreement, CU always flaunts its fiduciary responsibility to the citizens of Colorado. But when evaluating the purchase of the gravel pit, instead of obtaining an honest appraisal to determine if the asking price of $11 million was justified, CU's attorney wrote a letter to the seller stating, "The appraisal shall indicate an appraised value of a minimum of $16 million. Why did CU want an appraisal which stated a value of $5 million higher than the asking price? Documents obtained from CU under the Open Records Act make it very clear that University of Colorado administrators tasked with evaluating the pros and cons of purchasing the flood-prone depleted gravel pit for a new campus instead focused their efforts on selling the deal to the CU regents. A $16 million appraisal made it look like CU was getting a whale of a deal that could not be refused. In addition, the $16 million appraisal enabled CU to use its status as a 501c3 charitable organization to give the well-connected owners of the gravel pit credit for a $5 million tax-deductible gift. Some criticize the city for not purchasing the gravel pit, but I respect city staff for obtaining an honest appraisal which determined that a fair market price for the troubled property was $7 million less than CU's suspect appraisals. Furthermore, the city does not have a 501c3 status and cannot give credit for tax-deductible contributions. A caption in the Boulder Daily Camera stated, "A unique stone farmhouse stands on land known as the Deep Farm, part of the Flatirons mining project south of Boulder. It will remain standing in spite of the project." And the farmhouse did remain standing until CU became interested in the property and wanted to smooth the way for development. In notes obtained from CU, 2 lines refer to the farmhouse, 1, historic site, and 2, demolition permit. In June 1996, a demolition crew showed up and knocked it down. While CU wants us to forget about the past and only focus on the future, CU's past behavior at the site does not bode very well for the future. CU South is a depleted 308-acre gravel quarry. Reclamation entails restoring disturbed areas to a previous natural setting while minimizing environmental impacts. Planning for reclamation occurred at the time the gravel quarry was permitted, and a detailed reclamation plan indicating how the land was to be restored was an enforceable condition of the permit. Because of noise, dust, traffic, and the destruction of a lush pasture, in 1981 there was a great deal of opposition to the gravel mining permit. Because the site is at the entryway to Boulder, and to make the project more acceptable to the public, an exceptional reclamation plan was crafted. The plan included lakes and land shaping that provided a visually interesting topography. The lakes comprised 41.5 acres of water surface, but the area of the lakes to the top of the banks was easily twice that size. The lakes would have attenuated floodwaters flowing through the area, and the reclamation plan did not include a levee to divert floodwaters around the gravel pit onto neighboring properties. No private developer could significantly alter a reclamation plan, but the University of Colorado used its powerful political resources to persuade the Colorado Mineland Reclamation Board, against objections from both the City of Boulder and Boulder County, to revise the reclamation plan to accommodate maximum potential development. CU selfishly eliminated the majority of ponds, which would attenuate floodwaters, and added a levee to divert floodwaters around the gravel pit onto neighboring properties. When CU purchased the property, there was a levee surrounding the gravel pit, but that levee was only permitted as a temporary feature to keep waters out of the gravel operations, and it had to be removed at the completion of mining. The late Professor Dr. Gilbert White, the father of floodplain management and distinguished professor emeritus at CU, wrote a letter to the regents explaining the dangers the levee, or berm, posed to Boulder citizens. In a document prepared by CU to educate the public about CU South, CU falsely blamed the seller of the property for adding the levee. This letter is from a consulting firm to campus architect Bill Dino to provide CU with recommendations to revise the gravel pit reclamation plan to accommodate maximum potential development at a future date. And this is a letter from CU Chancellor Richard Binney urging the State Mineland Reclamation Board to revise the gravel pit reclamation plan because it is consistent with the university's needs and state's interests. How many times have we heard those words used to promote the annexation agreement? No private mining company, without the political power and lobbyists of CU, could have made the drastic, misguided revisions to the reclamation plan that were strongly opposed by both the City of Boulder and Boulder County. Many fear that once CU South is annexed, CU will use its political power and influence to get anything it wants. During the 2013 flood, Dr. White's warnings proved correct. Floodwaters were diverted around the quarry, while hundreds of downstream residences were severely flooded. In violation of basic fundamental principles of sound environmental design and working with nature, CU wants to intensively develop land with high groundwater levels that is more suitable for open space. CU installed French drains to lower the water table and to dry up wetlands. Jeffrey Lipton's, CU's past Director of Facilities Management, statement to the Boulder Daily Camera demonstrates how disingenuous CU's representatives have been when informing the public about CU South. If CU was willing to cooperate with Boulder in 1997, the millions spent on a 6,000-foot levee, draining wetlands, and contouring the land for maximum potential development could instead have been used to design and build a flood control project well before the 2013 flood. This figure depicts the north end of the flood control plan selected by the City Council to proceed to final design. But the plan had major obvious flaws, such as Veely Channel running headlong into the side of the dam, which would cause floodwaters to back up into the neighborhoods. A geohydrologist and I tried to inform city engineers and the Water Resources Advisory Board, which at the time was chaired by Dan Johnson, of this and other serious errors, but we were ignored, resulting in millions of dollars of additional costs to the city. Please listen to City Council member Rachel Friend's statement made during a City Council meeting about the value of public input.
This would be a staff engineering effort, as I understand it. So I would think we might want to specify that it would not involve public input or public hearings. Partly because we've all seen what happens to staff when we invite public hearings and scrutiny in ways that are unnecessary. So I don't know that we need to torment staff with further public process when we're asking them to do a scientific inquiry. I think that they could do the presentations to council and to OSBT and RAB that don't involve public hearings. So I would ask that we be kind to staff and not require that.
When the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan was revised in 2017, the footprint of the flawed flood control plan was used to designate the boundary for flood control. Land in the flood zone that could not be developed was designated for open space, and the remaining 129 acres was designated for CU development. But after the comprehensive plan was finalized, because of the inexcusable error where Veely Channel ran into the dam, the flood control facility had to be shifted south of Veely Channel onto land designated for CU development. The comprehensive plan is a guiding document and conveys no rights, but CU is unforgiving and demanded 129 acres above the level of a 500-year flood. The city caved into that demand, and city engineers readily devised a plan to place 150,000 cubic yards of earthfill on the parcel designated for CU development to provide CU with 129 acres above the level of a 500-year flood. This will add over $4 million to our utility bills. I discovered a document prepared by CU to sell the annexation agreement to the regents. It tells a very different story from the puff pieces written for the public. The description prepared for the regents lists $10.7 million of waived capital facility impact fees, which are paid by developers to cover additional demands on city facilities. When I asked the city for documents in which Boulder agreed to waive the fees, the reply was, no responsive records were found. At a recent debate sponsored by the Boulder Rotary Club, I asked Sam Weaver, who was mayor when the annexation agreement was approved, about the $10.7 million of waived fees. Please listen to his response.
I don't know what the $10 million impact fees that Mr. Bender is referring to are.
All of the information provided in this presentation is factual and based on documents obtained from the City of Boulder, CU, the Colorado Department of Natural Resources, and the Colorado Department of Transportation, and from audio and video recordings of Boulder City Council meetings, Planning Board meetings, and Water Resources Advisory Board meetings, and from newspaper articles. I wish I could put it more politely, but simply put, if the annexation agreement is not repealed, Boulder residents will be screwed. So please vote yes on 2F to repeal the CU South annexation agreement. Thank you very much for your time.